we'll go ahead and get started here. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Welcome, Colonel Slack, to our meeting. We'll a lot of stuff on the agenda, but we'll do our best to go through it. A lot of important things to go through. So, with that, we'll open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. We'll follow with a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll spend too many things on the agenda. We don't have near the crowd we did last time. Again, welcome everyone. Appreciate you guys taking the time to come out. We'll start rolling through the agenda here. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Paul Birchie.
I'll second.
Paul Hill seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Next item on the agenda is public comment period for any agenda items. Is there anybody that would like to speak? I think we got the roll on. Next agenda item is correspondence to the board. We have 4 here. I'll read them. Thank you so much for the gorgeous plant in honor of Peggy Johnson. Your kindness meant so much to us, Mike Coron and family of Peggy Johnson. Next one is from the Parrott family. Dear friends, thank you for remembering Jerry with a beautiful green plant. Jerry was pleased to serve the young people of our community by serving on the board. We are thankful for your service now. Mona, Drew, Sam, and Chris and families. Sorry to hear the passing of Jerry. Next one is thank you for the special cupcakes and coffee delivered in celebration of Thanksgiving. Daily, I feel blessed to be a part of the Knob School District. May God bless each of you as you lead our district with wisdom. Mrs. Sarah Willard. Very, very nice note there. Thank you so much for the tumbler and the gift card. It is greatly appreciated. I enjoyed my time at Knob School District and miss everyone so much. Once a Panther, always a Panther. Sincerely, Linda Norcross. Very kind note. Any other notes of mention? Moving right on to recognitions.
All right, well, welcome everybody. It's great to see everybody here. We have a couple phenomenal Panthers to be able to discuss tonight. And our first phenomenal Panther tonight is Hadley Kinnaman. Let's give Hadley a big round of applause. So Hadley, come on up. That's okay. So Hadley is a 5th grader at Whiteman Elementary, and we are honoring her tonight for becoming a published author. So congratulations, Hadley. And that is her book, The Epic Tale of Tin Can. So last spring, Whiteman Elementary had a virtual author visit from Stephen Kozan, and he hosted a writing challenge. And Hadley's story was chosen as the winning submission, and her story soon developed into the published book that she has right there. Hadley worked with Mr. Kozan throughout the summer to edit her book and to finalize her book, which is titled The Epic Tale of Tin Can. Hadley had her official book release at Whiteman Elementary on November 16th. Mr. Kozan and several local leaders attended the book release along with her peers and her teachers from Whiteman Elementary. District 21, Missouri Senator Denning Hoskins presented a proclamation to Hadley from the Missouri State Senate. Congratulations on that. And then Johnson County Clerk Diane Thompson, Stormy Taylor, Recorder of Deeds, Heather Reynolds, the Treasurer, and John Marr, the Eastern Commissioner, also presented a proclamation from Johnson County. Hadley, we are extremely proud of you and wish you the best of luck in the future endeavors as you write more books and become a very famous author. Congratulations. Hadley is also selling her books, so if you would like to buy those books, and while she's here, you could get a signed copy like that one that hopefully she goes back to me, because I don't want a signed copy.
When Mr. Kozan was here for her book release, she let him know that she was ready to write her second book. More
I don't know if my picture quality is good as but I'll try my best here. 1, 2, 3.
You can come on, take as much time as you like.
There we go. Sorry, not that.
So let's talk here for a minute. Have you sold any to the schools yet? Yes. Have we purchased these already for every school? Okay.
Ms. Grant got one for every school, for all the libraries.
Okay. Congratulations. Well done. I look forward to the second. You can see the second publication.
Let's give our author one more big round. And then our second Phenomenal Panther actually wasn't able to attend this evening due to some prior engagements. But we're going to honor Cadet David Butler tonight for his recent selection to the Air Force JROTC Flight Academy Scholarship. David is one of 200 Air Force JROTC cadets selected nationwide, which will send him to a select university. And he will work all next summer for 8 weeks of training, and he will earn his private pilot's license as a high schooler. The estimated value of this scholarship is $22,500. We're extremely proud of Cadet Butler and his selection for this very prestigious scholarship. Give him a round of applause. And Whiteman Air Force Base is already looking to sign him as well, so hopefully. And then, as we always do, we'd like to thank the Navitas Sonic for their continued support of our students and teachers. All of our Phenomenal Panthers receive a free ice cream with their coupon certificates tonight, so thank you to them as well. And that's it for recognition.
Great. Is that the same Butler that is running the family?
Yes, it does.
Congratulations to both our students. Next item on the agenda is the principal and director reports as presented. Is there any questions on the reports? Move on to the MSBA report.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Missouri School Boards Association's board report for the month of December. We thank you for the opportunity to share some news and information during a few minutes of your board meeting. We begin with a look at the 2021 MSBA Annual Conference in cooperation with the Missouri Association of School Administrators. This year's event was held in Kansas City for the first time after being held virtually last year due to the pandemic. Among the general session speakers was Gene Becker, best-selling author and the chief of staff to former President George H.W. Bush until his death in 2018. Becker is a Missouri Public School graduate. She said the former president's life of public service has lessons for all of us today.
He lived life with joy, with passion, but mainly he had a servant's heart. One of his favorite quotes was, any definition of a successful life must include service to others. And he didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. And of course, that's what all of you are doing by serving on the school board.
Other general session speakers included Pro Football Hall of Famer Tony Gonzalez and Kansas City Chiefs mascot Dan Mears. The conference featured more than 100 concurrent sessions on a wide range of topics, including a panel discussion with members of the State Board of Education and Commissioner of Education, Margie Van Dieven. The State Board of Education has now established the group's priorities for the upcoming legislative session. At the top of the State Board of Education's list of key legislative priorities, addressing the growing educator recruitment and retention issues affecting public education. Board members specifically want to see the minimum teacher salary increased from its current $25,000 per year to at least $35,000 a year by the beginning of the 24-25 school year. The board also intends to appoint a blue ribbon commission to make recommendations on teacher recruitment and retention solutions and opportunities. Other legislative priorities include addressing the digital divide in the state, exploring alternatives that replace the traditional time-based education system with a competency-based system, and phasing in a plan to allow local education agencies to count 100% of 4 and 5-year-olds in early learning programs in their calculation of average daily attendance in the foundation formula. Meanwhile, MSBA's Delegate Assembly met in conjunction with the annual conference to establish the position statements that will guide MSBA's advocacy work during the coming session that convenes on January 5th. MSBA's Associate Executive Director for Advocacy, Mike Reed, tells us he expects the legislature to consider several bills related to school boards.
I see recall being one of the first bills to be introduced. I'm a little afraid that school board elections moving from April to November will be pushed very hard. I think when that happens, we lose our identity in the middle of a big general election. And the school board running as a partisan situation, Republicans or Democrats don't have a candle completely on what's best for kids is what's best for kids, not on a party line. And so I think that would be devastating to many school boards to run on a partisan situation. But I believe all of those will come up for discussion.
MSBA will strongly oppose bills providing school board recall, moving school board elections to the November general election date, and efforts to make school board elections partisan. We'll be keeping you informed on developments during the legislative session through our weekly Legislative Voice newsletter, critical issue alerts, and immediate updates on Twitter. Information on legislative issues also can be found on MSBA's Action Center website. And mark your calendar now for MSBA's Legislative Forum to be held in Jefferson City on March 7th. That's it for this month's edition of the MSBA Board Report. Thanks for allowing us to have some time at your board meeting, and so long from Columbia.
Any questions, comments on any information in the board report? With that, we'll move on to the superintendent report. Over here.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Again, welcome for those who have joined us this evening. We appreciate being here. Welcome, Colonel Flack. Again, thank you for your time tonight. So a couple of follow-up comments on the MSBA report. We had a community forum last night talking about facilities, and the topic of preschool was mentioned and the future there, as well as a couple of other key issues. We talked about open enrollment, We talked a little bit about the ongoing, very quiet talk about consolidation and the different approaches that have been taken to maybe encourage that to occur here in Missouri. But when you talk about a $35,000 minimum teacher salary in the state, jumping up $10,000 from the 25, there are going to be a lot of districts that are, it's almost going to be impossible for them to meet that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes and really what that also will mean for the recruitment and retention. We talked a little bit last night about trying to make sure that we leverage resources and redirect them from overhead and management, or the concept of redirecting them from overhead management into the classroom and teachers' pockets where the rubber meets the road. So it'll be really, really interesting legislation to watch in that area. Then last but not least, one of the highlights for me of the MSBA conference was when our executive director, and I'm not sure what the position of our other MSBA representative was that was interviewing Tony Gonzalez, but the question was asked, so what was it like to be a professional athlete in the NBA? So needless to say, the room kind of thought that was pretty fun. All right, moving on to the superintendent's report. Along with this, I have a couple of additional items in the administrative content for some memos that went out to our families, so just archiving those there for the board's reference. I'm going to kind of breeze through this. We have a day and a half left this semester. We hope that things continue to go smoothly and that we blow right on into the Christmas break without any major hiccups. With that said, we've had a great semester. Really have had, in almost every way, a normal semester for our students. We've really had very little disruption overall as compared to the last 18 months. So hoping that that will carry through in the second semester. Winter will be what it is in Missouri, but I know that this semester our teachers have really put the time to good use. Tonight we're finally glad to have the opportunity to share last year's student assessment data. Mr. Coran will be reviewing that with the board following its release from embargo earlier this month. Overall, our student performance was good amidst the pandemic, with some areas of significant performance that we'll talk about. Facilities-wise, we're moving forward with plans and progress related to the first phase of construction on a potential new Mouser High School. That aligns to the board-identified projects that currently need to be addressed for now and in the future. We have a couple of agenda items tonight that are related to that to move forward. Following last night's town hall meeting, we also have some a communication series shared for the board to review and provide feedback. That is scheduled to be disseminated across the community in the next 3 months. Also, just kind of to recap prior public announcements, the district has been invited to submit application for a $4.5 million SEMA grant, which will come in the form of a monolithic dome and P361 storm shelter. So again, that is related to a number of agenda items tonight. Included along with this report is a flyer containing dates for the community engagement activities that are scheduled over the next couple of months. We again had one last night. We'll repeat that content in January, and then we'll move into a third and fourth community forum where our architects will join us, and then we most likely will have follow-ups after that. But overall, we are anxious to hear from our community and welcome their feedback along the way. As we approach the new year, we are already moving into hiring season. We have several positions posted. This agenda contains several resignations from employees taking advantage of the early notification incentive. We've also had a couple of resignations in our custodial ranks. We have that job posted and have some leads on some replacements there. But make no mistake, it's a competitive hiring market, and it's that time of year again. As 2021 comes to an end, I want to once again thank the board and our team, our community, and most importantly, our students for another fantastic year. We look forward to 2021 with a lot of momentum, high expectations, and energy for what's to come. allow our attendance for month ending November 2021 to stand as presented. Just under 1,900 students, 93.5% on our attendance rate. And it looks like Wyman Elementary comes out with the top slot, edging slightly over Navajo Middle School with a 94.37%. So keep up the good work, and let's drive those attendance numbers back up into the 95s heading into first quarter of next year. Finances for the month ending November 2021, standing at $20,213,732 in fund balances. Revenues to date, $5,547,453, which is around 25% anticipated. Expenditures to date, $7,941,990, which is 38.7% of budgeted. And that concludes my report. Welcome, Mrs. Davis.
Thank you. I have nowhere else. I heard this was the shindig
Next
in
one,
town.
next one of us.
Trust me, I do.
Is there any questions, comments on the superintendent report? As such, we'll continue down the agenda on to the consent agenda. Is there any questions, comments on any item in here? Has anybody filed for board candidates?
Great question. I was going to mention that we have on our board candidate filing, Dan Dilly has signed, and we've had, I want to say, 2 other applications picked up, or one other, two other. So it looks like we may have a number of options for our voters.
So just to highlight, this week, the filing ends at 2 p.m. on Friday and opens back up on December 28th from 3 to 5 p.m. for all those candidates. Any other questions, comments on consent agenda?
Did we take advantage of the snow day, virtual snow day option last year?
We did not. And we probably won't this year. We'll take it. It's really going to depend on the number of days. After the snow and dust settles, we make every attempt to try to get our students out before Memorial Day, and then we run that balance of days into a professional development week for our teachers. That's worked well the last couple of years. If we get into a pinch where we can't accomplish that, then we may take a look. The AMI plan allows for up to 36 hours, I believe, of snow day makeup time that can be done virtually.
I couldn't remember if we did or not.
We talked about it and we did not. The teachers were, it's kind of split on the idea, but many of them really like that surprise snow day.
As such, to move on, we need a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Paul Berge made the motion.
Second.
Grant seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0.
I need to clarify my comment. There was a big assumption in there that kids really like snow days too. And I don't want to throw that all on the teachers. But we did receive some feedback on that, but of course the kids' snow days are sacred. Sorry about that.
So next we'll move into the new business with the approval of the bills. Is there any questions, comments on the bills as presented?
Of that, I want to point out there was a reimbursement for mileage included in the regular bills to me. And usually anything that goes to Amy or I is separated out, but it was not in this one. And that was for my mileage for this semester, which is a normal submission.
Any questions, comments? We need a motion to approve the bills as presented.
Make a motion to approve the bills as presented.
Thank you, Grant. seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Next item is the approval of the bills that require abstention. Any questions, comments? As such, we need a motion.
Make a motion to approve the bill requiring extension presented.
Paul Birchie made the motion.
I'll second.
Casey seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So it passes 5-0-1. Next item on the agenda is the state assessment review.
So the reason why this is coming so late, this was embargoed until December 1st for us to be able to look at. You can see that there are 97 slides there for you to look at. So
I'm sure you detailed it.
we will go through this extremely quick. As we start in, obviously this is for last school year. This is math, EOC, and our ACT data as we look at it respectively. We start with K&E, and we start in our third grade. One of the big things that we look at with this, third grade does ELA and math. We look at this comparison chart of our students that receive advanced and proficient. And then on the next slide, what we do is we compare our advanced and proficient students, the total of those students, the percentage as compared to the state average. So you can see for ELA, we just edged out the state average by 1% on ELA. And as we click through for math, they edged it out by at least 8 here for the math in third grade. We did have a few areas where we did not. We'll continue through. Fourth grade ELA, we did go ahead and edge out there quite significantly. And then once we get to the math, we can see that we did not. We actually were under the state average by 3%. And then in fifth grade, here at K&E, we saw the trend of both ELA and math, 1% there in ELA, and then in math, we see 4% below the average in mathematics. We've not seen that in a long time. We think we have pinpointed a reason for that with some significant disruptions that were happening last year here at K&E. And then fifth grade also takes a science exam as well. And you can see that we were 4% above as well. Then going into Whiteman Elementary, we see very similar trends in the third grade where they were above both in ELA and math. So above that state average, and you can see that math state average, therefore our students at Whiteman Elementary, just blowing out the state average by a lot. I can't even do that math, no, I'm just kidding. And then ELA, you can see here in the fourth grade, very similar. Whiteman in math in fourth grade did beat the state average as well. Actually, they did not. They were 10 under, but I believe they did in fifth grade. So if we go to fifth, once again, fifth will be ELA. They beat the state average. And then in math, they beat the state average, and science, they beat the state average. And then as we get to, we get over to our Knob Middle School, I do want to brag on our middle school. These are some of the best MAP scores that we have seen come out of Knob Middle School since I've been here, not just in this position, but since 2007. So I want to congratulate them. In fact, there's a survey that's done for the MRVC, and Knob Middle School was #1, not just in sixth grade, but in seventh grade and in eighth grade, and not just in ELA, but in ELA and math, and also in eighth grade in science. So they swept the MRVC. and took home the trophy, I guess you'd say. Sixth grade math did great. Sixth grade ELA did great, as you can see as comparison to the state. And then as we go into seventh grade, they take ELA and math as well. So beating the state average there by 6%, and then math also beating the state average. And then ELA for eighth grade, beating the state average quite significantly. And then this next one's where I really want you to pay attention to the state average as compared to non-Mr. Mills. We've never seen numbers like this come out. This is our regular math classes. So in our middle school, we do an advanced math class in eighth grade where students can go ahead and take Algebra 1 for high school credit. And then these are the students that don't take Algebra 1. Normally, we do see this number around 30%, somewhere around in there, 27 to 30%. But this year, or last year, at 61%. So this is quite amazing with what was going on at the time for these students to be able to perform this well. So I want to congratulate the middle school. They did an amazing job of this. And then science, eighth grade also does science. So fifth and eighth do their science, and you can see how well they did against the state average. And as we come into non-Nostra High School, the Algebra 1 EOC data, you can see the note up there at the top that this also includes the eighth grade Algebra 1 EOC. I will say that eighth grade, every single one of those students scored proficient or advanced on the test. So another kudos to non-Nostra Middle School at that time. And then you can see 20% higher than the state average for non-Nostra High School. And then Algebra 2 is given to the students that take the eighth grade Algebra 1 test. They don't retest Algebra 1 when they get into high school, so they have to take a math test when they get into high school. And this is their test, the Algebra 2. And you can see that 85% of those students scored proficient advanced. So that's extremely good news and a great turnout for that. Biology EOC. And you can see our state average beating the state there. And ELA 2, we don't have to take ELA 1. We do provide an ELA 1 credit as well at non-Nostra Middle School. And then the students go in and take this ELA 2 EOC exam, and you can see that we beat the state average there by 4%. Government, this is the data that came in, the absolute latest that it possibly could have. I think I added it maybe 2 weeks ago to this, actually December 1st, so yeah, right then. And you can see where non-Nostra beat the state average there as well. And then personal finance, this is an odd one, so the screen is just going to have a note there. DESE does not keep any data on this. This goes basically to us. They give us the scores back of the students, and then they have us say whether or not the students pass this test. The reason why is, as a board, you voted to embed this credit into the JROTC program, and then also into our ag program. So we have students gaining ag and JROTC credit at the same time that they're gaining personal finance credit. And so what we do is we then just look at the test and the return on the test, and we decide whether or not those students meet the requirement, and we decided that all students met the requirement. And there's no state comparison. And then we want to get into our high school ACT data, and I want to give a big congratulatory wave over there to our high school. So our high school was recognized as the top 25 in the state for ACT data this year, and we were 16th in the KC metro area, KC metro area. So here is our English data, and with this, we can actually go back and compare years. So we do a 3-year comparison to prior years, and in 2020, You can see that Mount Nostra was at 20.2. We're down just slightly from where we were in English last year, or the previous year. And then in math, 20.1, down 0.2. You can see all the scores are somewhat down. And then we edged up as we go into reading at 22.1. And in science, we went up a full point in 22. And then our composite ACT score just combines all of those. We went up by 0.2 from our prior year that's represented here. And that 21.3 is what actually put us in the top 25 and 16th overall. And that concludes the data report. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So do you still use that map?
We use, yes, we use Eureka Math. We did not bring a trainer in, and I think that's something that we need to do to train our new staff. And then, as I said, we had some significant disruptions that happened in this building in one of those grades. And it didn't just affect the math score, it affected ELA, math, and science.
But overall, you like that program?
Yes.
Any other questions, comments?
We're having some talks about our approach. And, I mean, clearly, most of the indicators are things are going really well. We believe there were a couple of factors that contributed there, but we're also taking another broad look at our CIA approach. And Mr. Coron's been in my ear about that quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. So once we have something that we feel like is, well, obviously we'd have to run that through our administrative team, but we're starting to just step back and see if we're delivering where we should be.
And what do you use in the middle school?
So middle school uses illustrative math, and it does now finally drop down to kindergarten. And they've seen, obviously, have seen some great success with that. But we're taking a hard look at all of our resources across the board and looking to possibly schedule out some changes.
I was just wondering if you're still using it.
Thank you for the information. You guys review that or anything, have any other questions, feel free to reach out later. So we'll continue on to the COVID update for December.
Okay, so I'm going to abbreviate this as much as I can. We met with wing leadership a couple of weeks ago to discuss the Mount Nostra Board's position as it relates to mandatory vaccination. Following that meeting, we were informed by Colonel Deal that our employees would not be subject to any current mandatory vaccination, which was great news. And we sincerely appreciate the cooperation and partnership from our leadership out at Whiteman and Wolfen Court. Our employees do still obviously are required to follow the masking mandates, and we're happy to do that. On the other side of this report is the decision coming out of Cole County, Missouri, which basically called for the end of any masking and any quarantining, and that was picked up by the Attorney General in a letter and memo to all districts saying to cease and end any masking or quarantining, and that is in direct conflict with what we've been handed down from the CDC. And as a footnote, we are the Safe Return to School plan that the board has approved and reviewed that we're following is compliant with all the requirements from the CDC to be eligible for about, I think, 1.7 million in ESSER III funds. So we're kind of between a rock and a hard spot. This is a big topic among our administrative groups, and there are a wide variety of approaches that are being taken. Right now, we're staying the course. We've been, what we've been doing has worked for us for this year. It has worked for our parents and our kids, and we're trying to kind of ride the fence on that. But it's really interesting. I can't see it any other way than being politicized as it has been from the start. But it here locally is really being picked up. That the Secretary of State has now said that school districts cannot do any municipal bonds or borrowing unless they sign off and agree to follow the current and future guidelines from the Attorney General related to COVID. So if you follow the breadcrumbs on what's going on there, it definitely, it's hard to take politics out of this issue. I think, frankly, that our board would serve as a very, very good example of how you can take politics out, insert common sense in its place, and get through in a way that works for kids and families. So my recommendation is we stay the course. But I want to be clear to the board that we are now, it is absolutely impossible now for us to be compliant because we have two opposing guidances that have been handed to us. So with that, I think we stay with what's worked for us. And that's kind of a summary of where we're at. Overall, for COVID, our numbers are down. They've remained very low since probably mid-September, early September. We had that early spike in the year. After that, we've tracked it every week, and we're frankly in really good shape. We'll see what the flu season has to impact on COVID, but overall, I think staying the course is the right course of action.
Questions, comments from board members? With none, we will continue to march down the agenda. Next on the agenda is the RFQ for grant writing and the selection for the SEMA project.
Okay. With the invitation to apply, the first steps in the SEMA process is to secure a grant writing and grant project manager, as well as the architectural engineering services. We publicize both of those publicly in compliance with the guidelines of the eligibility criteria for the grant. On the grant writing and grant management, we received one proposal from Toth and Associates, which is the industry lead or the state leader with this process. Their application is attached for review. That was scored. Frankly, it was scored against no one because it was the only submission. And as such, we're bringing them forward with a recommendation. We have attached the agreement contract for board review. The fees associated with that FEMA grant are standardized in the criteria for the grant eligibility. This is the scoring rubric that we used and have shown those results. With that, our recommendation is to select Toth to perform grant writing and grant project management services for the SEMA HMVP Safe Room project.
Any questions? If there's no questions, we need a motion to approve this selection.
Make a motion to approve Toth and Associates Consulting Engineers and their contract to perform grant writing and grant project management services for SEMA HMGP Safe Room project as presented.
Paul Birchie made the motion.
I'll second.
Paul Hill seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Next, we'll move on to the selection of the AE firm for the SEMA project.
Okay. And everything I just said, except for the differences for architectural engineering services. We received 2 responses to that. One from Insight Design Studio, who the board is clearly familiar with through their ongoing work with the district. We also received, under administrative content, we have the secondary, or the second submission, which was from Veritas. Travis Wilson is the principal architect there, who used to be with HTK Architects. So we reviewed and scored both of those, and came out with a significant advantage for Insight Design Studio, not just because of their ongoing work with the district, but also because of their extensive experience with the type of project which is being proposed. With that, my recommendation is to go with Insight Design Studio to perform architectural engineering services for the SEMA Safe Room and associated projects.
Any questions? With that, we need a motion to approve Insight Design.
Make a motion to approve the selection of Insight Design Studios as the contract to perform architectural engineering services for the SEMA HMGP Safe Room project as presented.
Thank you, Kelly. Second. Is that Grant? Yeah. Grant, seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. Next item on the agenda is the selection of our approach for the construction for the non-grant.
So we met with President Bolton, and it's definitely nice to have someone that lives in this lane every single day to consult with and come to consensus, at least from a recommendation standpoint. To be clear, the components of the project that are included in the dome or anything connected to that dome will be a hard bid as a requirement of the grant. That includes everything in that project. So the large majority, which I want to say, what was that, about $8 million associated with that construction piece would be hard bid, but the additional components that the district is considering, the field, the stadium, some of the auxiliary buildings, all the other pieces, would be managed a different way based on recommendation, which would be the construction manager at risk. There are some pros and cons to that. At the end of the day, that general construction management firm would own the contracts, and they would subcontract, handle some of that business. Also, they could engage early with the architects and engineers in the design features, the approach features, which hopefully would result in a better proposal. After extensive discussion, we're recommending that the board move forward with the construction manager at risk process for all non-FEMA related components. And in doing so, the board would have to make that declaration publicly a week ahead of advertisement. So if the board so chooses to follow this recommendation tonight, a week from tonight, we would put an RFQ out on the street. And I want to kind of walk you through that timeline of what that would look like. So this is the memo that just describes in further detail the policy guidelines on what I just paraphrased to you. And in this process, you have to go through an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications process. Once we review qualifications, make selections, a minimum of 2, then we would invite them in for interviews and cost proposals. And then we would move into contract negotiation. So it's a 2-step process. It is a little more lengthy than some, but it's definitely something that can be accomplished, and it's just a series of steps that we go through. Timeline-wise, as I said, if the board chooses this tonight, we would be ready to publish sometime around the 23rd, and then a second publication the following week. We would provide about a month or so from that first initial publication for qualifications to be submitted. We would then evaluate, have the proposals due. If the board so chooses. We can have that done a different way, a couple of different ways. They can be due ahead of the interviews, or they can be brought into the interview and discussed in the interview process, and that would be subject to further conversation. We have an interview finalist. Again, policy requires interview of at least two. If two are received, which we expect that they would be, then we move to the selection and notification of the apparent successful bidder and tentative approval by the board. And then we're set for a construction period from June 2022 to November 2023. That could move just a little bit, but that is kind of what has been laid out by Insight Design. So that's kind of the timeline. It's going to be, any way we approach it, a busy first quarter, but with that work, hopefully we'll be set up for a groundbreaking sometime in late second, early third quarter.
So just to backtrack a little bit, want to make sure the board understands the difference between construction management at risk and construction management and the other more traditional approaches, design build, design bid build. So with the construction management at risk, we will select the construction contractor who oversees that early in the process, where they have input and they are required to provide input during the design. And they should be soliciting subcontractors to put forward the recommendations and things for the designers throughout the process. So very early contractor involvement in the whole process. It's called several different things, but in the at risk, it means that when you enter into the firm fixed price contract, they have some skin in the game. If you just go construction management, we would pay that firm, whoever that is, 5% or so, just to manage a bunch of subcontracts that the school would have with each individual bid package. But I know that's a lot of information to get thrown at you, especially when you don't deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So I want to make sure that the board understands that when they make the decision here. Do you have any questions about that approach? Any questions about pros and cons?
I guess one of my questions is, this is more in your wheelhouse than it is in the rest of the board members. Did you enlighten us on the direction?
So we like Dr. Wheeler discussed, we sat down and discussed this, and I don't see any drawbacks to doing this. The only thing I mentioned was that being in that role, you kind of limit the folks that are good at CMAR, but there's a reason for that. They've done it, they've been successful at it, and that's really the folks you want. So the key in it, and we discussed this, we've reached back to Insight, but we really need to define what makes the most sense to select a contractor. What are the important things? What are we looking to gain out of this? Their expertise and things like that. So I do believe this is probably the best alternative of the four different approaches. Especially when it's done properly. And in doing so, we need to make sure that there is the early contractor involvement. That this approach, what makes it unique is the contractor is sitting in the same design meetings as the design reviews, and they are published interim design submittals to make comments and follow and make recommendations on building systems or things that make sense. So it brings in a component of a design build approach where it allows them to go research very innovative ways to solve your problem or construct your project. So it brings that forward if it's done properly. So the key of it is make sure you have the right criteria to select that firm that you're going with, because they need to be involved in that early. Otherwise, this is nothing but a design bid build.
What kind of costs are we looking at?
Well, I don't think you're going to see any different cost. I'm not as familiar with I don't know if we have a flat fee like we would at CM. I don't believe so. We basically bring them on, pay them a fee to participate in the design process, and then they competitively bid the packages. So with that aggressive timeline, I would expect to push a civil package and have them build a civil package while they're completing the vertical construction or vertical design features. So you grade out your football field and all your mass grading, get your utilities in, your water, electric, and things like that. All that's pretty benign, and then you start coming out of the ground with another package, and we would have them bid that competitively, and they would put that together. And the good thing about this is all of that is very transparent, from my understanding. I've never been through this. The government does not allow CM at risk yet, I will say. We've tried some, what they've branded as early contractor involvement, and there's been successes and failures, and it all hinges on how engaged that construction contractor is during the design. But that is what makes or breaks this. If none of that makes sense, just let me know. I can try to explain it a different way. It makes total sense to me, but I've been doing it for 15 years.
So we won't know the cost until we have to go through the qualifications and select the firm based on their qualifications and what they tell us they can do for us based on their unique skill set, experience, etc. And then once we select based on those qualifications, then we move into a cost proposal and contract negotiation price. It will,
but I believe what the initial is that management fee, how you select them. So one might come in and say, I can do it for 4.74%. Another one might come in and say, no, I can do it for 4.85%. And that's what they're going to, I believe, I don't know for sure, but we'd have to go through it and a little bit more, get educated on that. But on the, I think it'd be the third phase of this acquisition strategy is when you start talking about this. So the first phase is very similar to what the government and our policy dictates for AE services, is go look at qualifications first. So get all your people that have never done this and or have demonstrated that they cannot do this approach. Get all of that stuff, information out on the table, and make a down select to the most highly qualified firms. That way you're only dealing with the direct negotiations with a very select few.
Sir, can I ask a question? How far in the procedure do you have to go with the construction manager at risk till you get to the point of we are definitely going this way and there's no, steering off the road to go another way?
In about 5 minutes. If it suits the board. We're going to do a motion here to select the methodology.
Before I brought this to that with President Bolton, we've vetted this through Inside Design. It's something we've talked about at length, and also bounced that off some other firms. And it's the consistent approach that was recommended me for a variety of good reasons. And just having him engaged early in the design phase, you would probably know from your work that you get something and you're like, this makes absolutely no sense. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. Maybe you have. And what this process tries to do is mitigate those situations to the greatest extent possible. And it takes into account what are we seeing in current projects, what are we seeing in material supplies, where did we do this where it was an absolute fiasco, what went extremely well, blending all that experience and knowledge into the approach with the architects, and then ultimately at the end, hopefully getting an exemplary product with fewer complications, surprises, and hopefully a good return on the investment.
So something we have seen recently as problems, and if you're familiar with structural building systems, you can have a structural beam, your big I-beams that go across, and you can have purlins sitting on top of those, or you can have bar joists that span that distance. And so what has happened is Amazon has went in and bought capacity on some of these steel manufacturing plants, and they've come in and wrote a check for a year's worth of capacity. So they haven't dictated which bar joist they want, they just want a year's worth of supply. And nobody else can come in and compete with that, including the federal government. And so we have projects now that are, I won't say delayed, but they are working scheduling issues because of that. And that particular situation happened up at Nucor, up in Omaha, Nebraska, which is somewhat of a supplier for our region. So in doing that, you can get a more local system that doesn't use bar joists, but uses Z-purlins or C-purlins in a different building system. And the idea is to have your subcontractors come and be a part of this process and say, hey, look, if you do it this way, it's going to cost you 8 months for structural design delivery. If you go this way, we can go to a more local supplier and we can cut 4 months off of your schedule. So it's conversations like that save this process. It might cost a little bit more depending on what the structure is and that sort of thing, but in the long term, you're paying overhead and things for a contractor to be sitting on site, kind of slow rolling your first half of the project waiting on structure speed.
So at this point, I'm ready to go with recommended action to put a motion forward, so.
Yeah. It really does sound like you, Mr. Bowen, and the administrative team have really looked into the details of that. So I'm totally comfortable with that, and that's a good job for you guys.
So I will say, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, now's the thing. We're going to make the decision here if it's the will of the board, but if there's anything that you want to know more about this or anything, it's of interest to me, but that's what I do. But feel free to reach out at any time. I'll be more than happy to walk you through it, pros, cons, whatever. If there's no other questions, comments, if it's the will of the board, we'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to initiate the process to select a construction manager at risk to perform services for the non-FEMA/SEMA components of the proposed construction project.
Thank you. Paul Hills made the motion.
I second the motion.
Paul Birchie seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. I will say we will come back and we will discuss the involvement of the board in the process of evaluation. If there's anybody that wants to be a part of that, we can either do a subcommittee or individuals or however that is, or if there's greater than 3 that want to do that, we can do a full board meeting. But not everybody has to attend unless they want to do that. That'd be anything greater than 4.
I think we have to have 4. I reread that, I'll confirm, but I think we have to have a quorum because it does have to be done publicly. But I'll provide all that guidance, but it is definitely something that we would encourage you to strongly consider being part of. I said 4, less than 4 last time, but I looked a little bit deeper. I think we had that minimum of 4. All right.
So I typically go through the source selection process somewhere between 3 and 5 times a year. It's a neat process if we get it right. If we define these things early on, we can foresee what we're trying to accomplish, and we can define those criteria good enough to get good proposals. It's really a neat process. So, but it takes a lot of looking in the future, 9, 12 months. So, or 4 months on this one. Very aggressive schedule. So we, with that, we will close that agenda item. We're going to jump to the audit presentation. Mr. Brian Eckhoff will come join us and give us a presentation of audit.
Just not in front of that. So here's perfect. I can go, or you can click either way. Button or click. Oh.
Perfect. All right. I'm Brian Eckhoff with Westbrook & Company. We're going to do a brief overview of the financial statements. If you have questions as I'm going through it, don't hesitate to stop me and kind of address them as we're going. Kind of different situation this year with all the federal dollars that have come out. We've kind of been a little backlog, so they can attest to, I think we got your audit done on Monday, Tuesday, but they're all kind of going together. So kind of a little different situation this year. However, for your guys' audit, page 2 of the audit, you can see the opinion, and it'll say that the financial statements were presented fairly. So it's a clean audit opinion or a good audit report. So exactly what you want to see in your financial statements. This is the statement of activities. We always highlight this for the food services and community services. However, if you compare this financial statement to last year, it looks nothing like last year. Your food service on this looks like your total expenditures for food service were only $10,840, and you make $28,000 on food service this year. The reason for that is because everyone has been switched to 100% free, and it is actually funded through a community services function now. So when you're looking at that, this will not be apples to apples with last year because all of your food services actually ran through a community services code this year the way it was funded. This is your balance sheet as of June 30th. I double checked because I thought this was a typo because I've never had anybody have exactly $7 million. However, in the general fund, it is exactly $7 million. Capital projects fund had $15.6 million for a total of $22 million. Down at the bottom, you can see the fund balances. Those were made up of various things. In your general fund, you have $20,000 restricted for scholarships. Those cannot be spent on anything except for scholarships. The assigned balance for student activities as your club organizations, they carry over from year to year, so you'll be using those on those in future years of $219,000. And then with food service, NESE requires you to track the balance that you actually made on food service and spend that on future food service expenditures. So because we had an increase in food service, we have to track that balance so that you use that next year on food service or following year. The remaining balance in general fund is always shown as unassigned, so the $6.5 million is your day-to-day operations of the district. Capital projects, we have $1.2 million committed. That's the contracts that you guys would have entered into as of June 30th, had not been paid yet. And then the remaining balance in the capital projects fund is always shown as assigned because that is for future capital projects. This is the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. You can see down the bottom, it's highlighted, the increase in fund balance this year was 4.5 million. Overall, your general fund was pretty flat, it increased 45,000. However, your capital projects fund increased 4.5 million this year. Summary of your debt, we had 3.2 million outstanding as of June 30th with 225,000 due this year. Those payments are just standard annual payments, no balloon payments or anything like that to prepare for. This is a 5-year comparison of your revenues. If you look, you can see federal revenues went from 8.6 million to 11.5 million. That was due to a significant increase in your COVID money, all the coronavirus funds, basically. Overall revenues went from 21 million to 24 million. This is a 5-year comparison of your expenditures. You can see that your salaries and benefits have always hovered in that 77 to 80% range. Overall expenditures went from 18.6 to 20 million. Overall, if you look, you can see your salaries went from almost 11 million to 11.7. So salaries continue to increase, but as a percentage of your entire budget, it stays about the same. Your reserve ratio this year is 35.79. We consider that a healthy, financially stable school district. It's a slight decrease from last year. Average daily attendance, this kind of surprised me because all the other districts I've audited had significant decreases in attendance this year due to the COVID situation. Your guys' actually did not decrease a significant amount, so that's good. Just want to keep an eye on it, make sure that we want it to go back up. So you guys want a steady increase. Keep an eye on it just in case we do have an increase for a couple of years, have to maintain budget, things like that. So something to be aware of. Over here, we look at state laws, state statutes. If we see anything, we bring it to your attention. And you can see here it says that it was fairly stated, so there were no material state items. However, we did have a few items that we changed on things that were uploaded to DESE and things like that. First one on attendance, the pre-K kids, their hours, attendance hours reported on Court Data didn't agree to your software. And it was just pre-K, just that one grade. So we made a correction to what was uploaded to DESE, and since we made that correction, more reports that were already uploaded to DESE were required to report it here. On attendance also, you guys have a pilot program where people that work at Whiteman can enroll their students. They are required to work at the district, and there were some students this year that their parents did not actually receive a paycheck from the district. So we have a comment on that. So if they're going to be enrolled in that program, they really need to be regular employees of the district. The last one is transportation. The less than 1 mile riders were reported as less than 1 mile, and they were also reported as regular riders. You're only allowed to report them as less than 1 mile, so we had to back those out of your regular riders. So we had to change your application for state transportation aid. While we're here, we look at internal control. We don't give an opinion on internal control, but we use it to determine the risk factors and where we're going to spend additional time. If we come across deficiencies, we bring it to your attention in the audit. And you can see here it says we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control. Lastly, you have a federal state audit or single audit. It's called the Uniform Guidance Audit because you have over $750,000 in federal expenditures. You can see at the bottom we didn't identify any deficiencies there. So on the federal program side of things, it is an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion or a good audit report. No, all the way down, we did have one deficiency noted. We'll talk about that in just a second. You can see we tested the Child Nutrition Cluster, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, Impact Aid, and Education Stabilization Fund. We have never tested 4 programs here before. Due to the increase in federal dollars, we had to test additional programs this year. So they were ready to get rid of us, I guarantee it, because of all the information we asked for and went through because of volume of quantity on federal program side of things this year. So bottom question, did you qualify as a low risk auditee? No, it's because you have cash basis financial statements. You cannot qualify as a low risk auditee. When they wrote uniform guidance, they wrote for accrual basis financial statements. 99% of school districts in the state of Missouri are cash basis. So basically what that means is we just have to audit a higher percentage of federal programs. Don't change the accrual basis financial statements. I'm not saying that. Stay cash basis. Just know we'll be auditing a higher percentage of your federal programs. So the one thing noted on the federal side was the impact aid. Those kids that I said earlier that were listed, that their parents didn't work, they were actually included on your impact aid application. So since they were not employees, they shouldn't have been claimed as attendance, so they shouldn't have been claimed on the impact aid as well. So that is this federal comment. While we're here, we come across anything immaterial, small instances where we think we can make improvements to the district, we bring it to your attention in the required communications. We've got a few things. Some of the things come from other districts where we've seen things happen, where we think, hey, we can make an improvement here. Other things are things we come across where it's things that are happening where we think, hey, this really needs to change. The first one, the purchasing policy. Your guys' purchasing policy says you'll go out for bids if it's between $3,500 and $50,000. When we did our work, the actual bids weren't attached to the invoices. So our recommendation is there's a sheet. I don't know if I shared it with you guys or not. Okay. There's a sheet basically, and with that sheet, you summarize all the bids you got, you attach the bids to that sheet, and you attach it to the invoice. That way, the auditor knows, hey, we did our due diligence, we actually did all the bids that we said we did, here's all the documentation for those bids. So, getting all that documentation in place basically is a recommendation for the first one. The bottom one is just a heads up for that food service that I talked about, how all of your food services ran through a different program this year. Your food service to the tune of $386,000 went through community services this year. So we just wanted to highlight that number so you guys were aware of if you look at the statement of activities and try to compare it to last year. Last one here on local tax effort. You guys had 8 foster kids. So the state of Missouri will allow you to actually bill those districts where those kids came from for their local tax effort. And we didn't see any local tax effort revenue in, so put some sort of process in place to monitor the kids that are placed into your district so that you can bill those sending districts to get their local tax effort and to help support those kids when they come to this district. Top one is a repeat from last year. Your policy says you won't provide insurance if they don't work 20 hours per week, but we've got 2 employees that are getting insurance, so either change your policy or tell those employees you can't have insurance. That's basically the recommendation on that one. And then the bottom one, this one came from an actual state audit of another district. And then we asked you guys about it and kind of came across it. So Marshall State Audit just got released, and State Auditor wrote them up because they didn't have every single salary stipend on a salary schedule, all the way down to gatekeepers. So we've been diving in all of our districts to figure out, is everything on salary schedules, is everything on contracts, is everything documented? State Auditor says if it's not documented, if it's not on salary schedules, if it's not on contracts, then there's no equality of pay across the entire district. So it needs to be on some sort of salary schedule and a contract. So this last recommendation is basically turn your salary schedule from a 4-page document to a 40-page document that has every option on it, unfortunately. And that came from Marshall State Audit, is how we kind of stumbled across that one. So, overall, a clean opinion, a good audit report, just some things that we can make adjustments on.
One question I have on transportation on the bus ridership, Brian, is kids under 1 mile are counted differently than kids that ride a bus over 1 mile.
Correct.
What is the reasoning behind that?
So the original law that was passed was you're required to pick up kids over 1 mile from your district building. If you as a board elect to pick up kids less than 1 mile, it goes either 1, at the district's expense, 2, the parent's expense, 3, they're called HB 1180, which is if you don't have crosswalks, if you have to go across railroad tracks, basically there's a safety factor, which is probably 75% of your less than 1 mile riders. So on your actual transportation calculation, DESI takes it, they look at your ridership, and then if you have HB 1180 riders, they don't really hurt you on your calculation. If you have at district expense, it's a little hit towards your transportation funding that they take against you saying, well, you've got expenditures in here that aren't actually allowable because we tell you you're only supposed to transport kids that are greater than 1 mile.
I guess the issue I have is, first of all, we don't receive enough money for transportation as far as I'm concerned. And for the state to tell you that they're 100% fully funded, in the past when they actually used to be 100% fully funded, but now they call it 100%, but you're only at 72%. You see what I'm saying? So, but they can sit there and they can fudge their math all they want, say we're fully funding your transportation, when it's not the way when they change the numbers over the years to fund it for less money, but they still call it 100%.
Yeah, the appropriation factor is.
You see what I'm saying here?
decreased significantly.
So, whatever.
So, and you're, I don't know if I can get. Your transportation funding, you spent $749,000, the state gave you, well, that may not even be completely state, but $178,000, helping pay for that $749,000. So, I agree with you 100%.
You know, but it's interesting to see you find stuff like this, and this just protects us from ourselves, because if we do end up in a Martian situation, we've already had you in here to you know, bring anything to our attention, which is good. I mean, I'm certainly glad that we went with Westbrook and Associates several years back.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, and honestly, this is my first time ever hear this. It sounds like, you know, I've dealt with IRS many times before, there's a million ways to screw up, and you don't necessarily have any training or knowledge of exactly how the law is written. And it seems to me, in the year of COVID, that's totally great, and you guys went through it, and it's good to me.
Well, having been a board treasurer for several years off and on, you know, I've been through previous audits with the different auditing firm that brought stuff took to our attention that I consider much more worrisome than what we're looking at today. You know, there were really red flags in the past. Anyway, we're in a good place.
Yeah, we, obviously a very extensive audit with the deep dive into our federal programs. And, you know, at the end of the day, the process is about helping us get better. And, I think we looked at a couple of things, this year that have helped. We ran the metrics on that mistake that was made on that transportation report. I think it didn't make a penny's difference on the funding up or down, but we want to get it right. So we'll follow up with the folks in that department, make sure that everything's good. But I mimic what Paul said. We're glad to have the A-team taking care of business for us.
Appreciate that.
Well, I think we're in a uniquely different situation because of the military installation and the impact inside of it that puts us in even when you talk about ADA, you know, we don't see that much of a decrease at all compared to other districts. But like I said, we're in a uniquely different situation than a lot of districts. You're aware of that.
Yes, you are, for sure. And one last thing, I say even if you weren't here, kudos to the staff, because we've had a lot of districts where we've had a lot of journal entries this year, and we only had a few journal entries this year. So with the federal program side of things, we've had to make a lot of adjustments. Some of it not the district's fault, some of it the other district's fault. So it's always nice when you know you're going to make several journal entries to get financials correct before you go over them.
I tell you what, if you could just take this back to your folks at Westbrook and Associates and pass it on, that we really appreciate everything you guys do, your team does to help us.
Appreciate it. I will for sure.
So what about, I mean, how concerning is that significant deficiency?
The impact aid, the 20 kids, it's a concern. It's a situation that we have to figure out how to handle going forward. And Dr. Wheeler and I have kind of talked about it on the interpretation of regular employees and stuff like that, and the gray area, and how far to get into the gray area and stuff like that. So I've had districts that have had federal comments before. I've never had anybody that has ever had to repay the funds. So he had to write a corrective action. When I uploaded for the uniform guidance, we submit the corrective action. They read it. They may reach out to you and say, hey, are you implementing this policy and procedure? And then that's where all of them are going to stop on our end. I've never had them come in and say, hey, repay the funds that were questioned or anything like that. Definitely something we want to get corrected going forward, for sure.
Well, like I said, we're in a completely different situation, and we throw COVID into the mix and the online learning and everything else at the time we weren't in school and everything else. And I feel like some of that stuff may have played a factor in that particular.
We'll be working with, with the feedback here on the audit process as well as our district attorneys to, because we are that pilot program, we recognize that it is operating in a gray area. It's great for our triple bottom line with military value and service to kids and revenues, and it has good intentions, but we want to make sure that that there aren't any unintended consequences. So, it's something we've been doing. We're going to take a much closer look at the process and see if we can find the right way forward on that.
And then as far as the board paid insurance, this is the second year in a row that's come up. Is there a reason?
Yeah, I don't want to do it. We've got some employees that are doing great services and a great job. They're unique, and while it doesn't align to policy for everyone, what I think we're going to do probably, and we'll talk this over, but we'll probably look at the contract language to see if it can be for a specific. What it essentially is, it's a condition of employment for a specific position, but when you stack that compared to policy, it's not consistent with the policy that should apply to everyone. So we'll be navigating some way forward that works for the district, but
It's the same, sorry, it's the same job description from last year, also the
same position. So I think we can find a pathway forward to get that one shored up. But it's definitely it's a condition of employment for a position that's doing great service for the district. And probably could be classified a little bit differently as well. Is probably what we need to do.
Is there any other questions, comments for Brian?
One more, I'm sorry. So, well, actually, it's probably for you. The payroll thing, is that gonna totally change the, talking points or whatever? The teacher salaries are coming up, right?
The increase in payroll cost, or
Well, their stipends and stuff, everything being put into.
No, that will not significantly change the primary position. So, think gatekeepers and clock workers, which we pay a flat fee, but there are some positions like the extended contracts, payment there, that just getting those down. What we have historically done, we're getting it down on paper, so that we can ensure consistency on that pay. But that would not be an invitation on the context of that conversation does not impact the upcoming decisions on employee compensation.
You'll continue to pay the same amount you're paying, it's just they'll all be more approved, they'll all be on some sort of salary schedule, and they'll all be on some sort of contract. Basically, pay exactly what you're paying, just document all of it.
Email the list, so that we know which ones, thank you.
No, because I only picked, I think I went through 3 or 4 of them that I found.
Okay.
Then I just, basically what I did is once I found a couple, I just said, we just need to make sure everything is on some sort of college schedule. And I know it's going to be extensive work, and it's going to be a long list. I'm sorry. I just said, $10 for everything, so I was guessing you covered.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Brian.
So, quick question here, what, is there anything that you recommend that the board, look at, or as a result of the significant finding, is there something that we should be doing, as we go forward? What questions should we be asking, or what recommendation would you give the board going forward?
Would it be something where we could maybe have you meet with the board and consult, or or maybe do a follow-up. Would that be?
Maybe a training.
Would that
I
be?
know Diane mentioned that. And then we'll-
Yeah, I was just kind of looking for something general, but I think that.
It basically be a deal of dive into, like you said, dive into the wording of the impact aid, figure out how far you want to get into that gray area, what the board's agreeable upon, and then get with your attorney to figure out their interpretations of it, and then come up with the board's idea of how you're going to handle that situation.
So so the board needs to be involved in all that process? Is that what you're saying?
Probably the beginning and the end, not the middle. So, get with Dr. Wheeler, develop a plan of how you're going to attack this, who's gonna handle what. Obviously, he'll probably do all the reaching out to individuals, and then he'll report back to you guys with all of the results and tell you, here's the pros, here's the cons, here's the gray area, here's the way we can handle the gray area, and then you guys decide how you would like to handle that gray area. How aggressive or conservative you want to be. Because it's relying on the interpretation of the word regular, basically. A regular employee.
Okay, give me the bookends of what's at odds at regular.
So, in order for you to claim attendance on the student, it says the person has to be an employee of the district. Does employee mean a paycheck, a W-2, or 12 paychecks, or 24 paychecks? What does that mean as regular employee? How many paychecks do we have to get from the district? The interpretation of the word regular.
Well, but in the past, we've had a mentorship program at the high school where parents stepped up and were involved with veterinary professionals in that particular building, you know. So now we're back to the gray area, what you consider regular and what's considered an employee. I mean,
Yeah, and
see what I'm saying?
the attendance side of things, there's no, I've dove into this a lot. All it says is the individual's parent has to be an employee of the district. It does not say regular. It just says employee of the district. So the state comment was, these 20 kids, the parent never received a check, so they weren't an employee of the district. That one's easy. They can be an employee of the district, okay, they can pay their employee. The impact aid side of it, it says they must be a regular employee of the district. Then you fall into the gray area of the interpretation of regular. So there's kind of two sides of it, the state side and the impact aid side. The state side is the easy one. The federal side, the impact aid side, is the one where we have to figure out the interpretation of regular.
And I saw in there that that could be anything from substitute.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's no instances of what the federal government has classified as regular.
So I've got a staff member at the office diving into it. I sent Dr. Wheeler some wording. It was, I don't even remember it. She got it out of some of the impact aid documentation, and it went towards the side of getting a paycheck once a month, basically, what it said. So, as opposed to on the attendance side, or the state side, it just says an employee, which in my opinion would be to get a minimum of a year.
You know, I feel like this particular program was well thought out, thinking outside the box, and it has generated.
It's been really good for our.
It's been great for our,
Absolutely.
it's been absolutely, and not just for our district, but great for the military.
Yeah.
We serve.
So this is a program that, this is not first or second year that we've run it, but again, it's been good for our triple bottom line, but we don't want to add any unintended consequences. So you guys know I'm pretty conservative by nature, but on this one, we early on looked at a very literal application of the word regular, especially when it applies to substitute employees who may regularly substitute in the district, but they only do that once or twice a year, every year. So a little bit of, we just need to clean up what we're doing. The 20 employees that are 20 students that were listed there that were not employees this year. I mean, we had COVID and some other issues, and some of them PCS, before they serve. So there's some things that we need to do that we have already, frankly, taken action to do to make sure that we take care of that piece. That will be no problem. It's the making sure that we can continue to use the relatively loose language to meet the needs of our families in our district. And that probably is about all that we can say on that.
Are we only talking about the Little Weekend?
No, several are Little Wingman, but this is a program that we carry K-12, pre-K to 12, for, I think, the third year. It's been a very good program, and hopefully we can use this as an opportunity to make it even better.
So one thing in your presentation, in the summary page, the very last page, I think that finding was under internal controls, but you said all internal controls were.
So there's two different sides of it. So there's an internal control report. Internal controls looks at basically your finance side of things. That's the internal control report. But then under the uniform guidance audit, the federal audit, we look at internal controls as well as federal NATO programs. So with that, it falls under the internal controls under your federal programs, because basically there wasn't a review process to make sure you're meeting guidelines of the federal program. So that's why it's very confusing right now. It's just two different sides of the actual report. So it's under the federal guidance internal controls, not under the internal controls of the overall district financial side. Does that make sense? How should I explain?
The school, you must have it gone through.
Yeah, they don't teach you this stuff in college.
Any other questions, comments from board members? So I do want to say one thing. I contacted Brian and had a conversation with him, and it was, and I disclosed to Brian that this was the reason. I have a friend of mine that is a board president that said that it's state law to the auditor reach out to the board president every year, and this is the second year I've served this role, and I've never been contacted. So I initiated contact with Brian and asked him if that was the case, and I'd love for you to elaborate that.
So basically, the way we do our communications is through those letters that you receive. So for us to meet the requirements of communicating with everyone, it's through the documentation that you guys fill out every year. That 3-page request that you get mailed where you fill out what anything you have going on and you sign it. And then you say, and if there's anything noted in those, then we usually reach out to you individually as hey, this is how you fill out your letter. What are your concerns, what are your comments, things like that. They all came back with no comments, no concerns, no related parties, so then usually we do not reach out on top of that if they're completed with those. So.
That's news to me. I didn't know the state law that you had to contact the auditor, or the auditor had to contact you. I would have contacted your board treasurer would be the next one.
That's the guidance in what they do on theirs, I guess. It doesn't sound like it's.
We're hired by the board. We communicate with the board. We do our communications through those letters. There's no actual state law that says I have to talk to the board president. It's just guidance that says you're supposed to communicate with the board during the process. So.
But you understand the board president.
Yeah. And our stance usually is, if you go through the letter and the letter's filled out as none, that was our communication with the initial. So then we do that, and then whenever we do the exit conference, we have a board member come into the exit conference, so that we're communicating on the back end during the exit conference all of our information. So, we do it through letters and through the exit conference.
But you also mentioned that, irregardless of what officially is on that letter, if you ever have comments, concerns, he's got an open phone line and was more than willing to talk to me, and appreciate that.
Yeah. If any board member calls, we are open and available. So we are hiring you guys. So if I come across anything that I think that is going on with these three individuals over here, it is a phone call to you as a board, or to the board president, so that you can communicate to the board, or if any of you have concerns, you reach out to me individually and then we address them. So.
And for the rest of the board, myself, Brian, and Dr. Wheeler, we met, basically a month ago, and at the same meeting, basically with the same information put out that was just transpired in this meeting. So, yeah, I thank you for being a part of that. So.
Seems to me, just looking in, it seems like a totally good process and it works, Your job is to find out what's wrong potentially and come up with ideas to fix it, and there you go. Seems like a good process to me.
I think got a ways to drive home, Brian, so thank you.
It's a little warm with the wind.
Yeah.
Sorry, about ready for that storm.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Merry Christmas, brother.
Hey, you too. Thank you.
Be safe. Thank you.
I think while we're on the audit, we'll go ahead and complete the item K here for the fiscal audit. We kind of just closed the presentation. We'll move into approve the fiscal audit as presented.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the fiscal year 21 fiscal audit as presented.
Paul Hills made the motion. Casey seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. We will return to the facility plan communication mini-series. I'll give a overview.
Sure. This was actually a late upload. We did a final edit and alignment. This is not a final, but a final administrative edit. This is a communication series that we have slated to go out over the next 10 weeks to our community in a variety of different methods. And it really just kind of tells our story, where we've been over the last 5 or 6 years, from a relative information standpoint, what has gone into our pathway, what has gone into our rationale, our considerations, in some cases no action, and then more recently to the action that we are have on the table as proposed as of now. It has 10 pieces, kind of goes over performance in the district, the recent focus by the Department of Defense on quality of education and as that relates to mission readiness and quality of life. We'll talk about the role of Navajos Public Schools in driving community and economic development. Then we segue into why the need for a new Navajos High School and what that would mean for our existing campuses. Talk about the current state of affairs in Navajos schools, just a variety of quick hitters on the big ticket items in the district. Then we segue into talking about local tax effort and federal impact aid. Then move into the grant making opportunities with the Defense Communities Infrastructure Program as well as the infrastructure bill. And then current progress towards that plan. Talk a little bit about open enrollment and some risk and opportunity that is presented in that current legislation that's being pushed in Jefferson City. And then next steps. So what I would ask from the board on this is, as your time allows, please read through this and Try to provide feedback. If you see anything that doesn't sound or look right or read right, let me know. And then anything that you feel, excuse me. I must smell really good. Note to self, add cologne to the Christmas list. And then they'll bother Coron. He probably uses essential oil or something that takes flies away from him. Back to where we were. Look through this. Let me know if there's anything relevant that you feel like needs to be added to this. We've tried to take a pretty comprehensive approach for what people would need to know. Try to approach issues that we feel like we might be challenged on. Provide that information, factual information that may help mitigate any misinformation, but also help people in forming opinions about the work that's ahead of us. But if there's something you feel like needs to be included, let me know. But overall, it's a pretty unique storyline from where we've been and where we're going. Last night, we held our first community forum. We'll have another replication of last night's forum, and then 2 follow-up forums that have been scheduled with our district architects to engage the community, kind of tell the story, and then provide question and answer and feedback. And then down the road following that, we may also look to engage the community in specific design elements, should they wish to have an opinion or provide input. This is kind of the slideshow version of that communication mini-series. Lots of information that the board has seen before, some new information, this being one of those of what a new school, a new high school project down in Waynesville meant for growth and assessed valuation. And again, just our storyline, where we've been, things that you guys have seen in the tax rate hearing, trying to condense that into one succinct line of progress in the district that has led to where we are considering this new Navajo High School Innovation Campus. So let me know if you have any questions. This is information only and feedback on the board.
I thought the thing last night, the presentation was fantastic. The information was concise, and if you weren't a huge fan of the district going into the briefing, after an hour, I could not imagine how you could possibly not be this awestruck. Because I've seen the data several times, and it is amazing to me what has happened in the last 3 years, and you guys all have been part of that, and I'm just floored to see it. Because there's so much good stuff that it almost belittles all the good stuff because there's so much good stuff, you know what I mean? Whereas if there was just one single bullet, you would think, wow, that's amazing. But then you put 10 on there that are all individually amazing, and it just is like an amazing salad.
Thank you. It causes a problem too, because there are a lot of families that want their kids to go to school here, and we try to find creative ways to allow that to happen. But it's a great thing, and it really demonstrates the work of our entire team here in Navajo, from our support staff to our teaching ranks and all the way up to the governance level on our storyline. It's exciting. We're excited about what's to come, and really look forward to that community engagement. Last night we invited, if you know of someone that is, that has any concerns whatsoever, come in and let's have a meeting, talk, sit down, listen, and kind of talk through any concerns that might exist. But that's the storyline. But again, for the board, if there's something you guys see or think of that you feel like is an important element, let me know, because we can modify this as we go. It's going to be a long process over 10 weeks. It'll pass quickly, but we could extend that into 12 or 14 if there are other pieces that you guys feel need to be included. And frankly, we may receive feedback in this process that causes an additional component to be placed into this series to respond to that concern. That, frankly, be ideal because it gives us an opportunity to feel that and then respond back out. Mrs. Brand has done a good job with spreading this across the community. I think she has this in maybe 18 or so businesses. All of these will be going in weekly. And then we have some mailers, and then of course our website, social media, and then post a lot of this on the YouTube page. That will all then be anchored into a landing page on our district website. In every one of our conversations, we're going to try to empower, kind of get a team of key communicators that will carry this out into the community, try to engage their neighbors and their friends and folks at church, and make sure that we get as many people engaged into the two-way communication process as we can.
So one thing I didn't realize going into this, and you kind of define the four different what's going to be said at each one. I think it needs to be broadcast out. That the next one's going to be repeat the first one, and then the broad stroke topics on 3 and 4. That was not clear to me, but I think it would be good to communicate that in case people were on the fence and said, hey, I'll just go to the last one or something. Okay, but you're going to miss 2 other topics in there. So, but I will say I was in attendance. There were 3 board members in attendance: Paula Hills, Casey Kennan, and myself. It was kind of nice to see all this put together. We'd seen probably 95% of this information, but it had never been comprehensive in this nature, and it paints a little bit different picture than I had with being presented individual components. So if you have any time, I would encourage you to go watch or attend the following community engagement pieces.
Spectacular. It was very limited, but we kind of expected that with what was going on. We had some conflicts that when we set the date had a miscue on that. But it was, what I will tell you is, of those that attended, they, when you gauge the engagement of a room, there was a very engaged group, and at the end there were some very good questions that were really, you could tell that what I gauged was it was not yelling, it was not ridiculous feedback. It was very good questions based on the content, probably based on some of what may be said in the community. And I think it shows that there is some discussion that's going on and some awareness out there that's growing, which is good. We asked multiple times to help them, ask those that attended to engage and invite others to engage and follow up. I think our January will clarify what President Bowman said, but I think we'll have a larger group in that second session.
How many attended virtually? Did you ever find out?
I did not look yet. We will have that on our YouTube channel, so we'll be able to view. We should be able to view the number of views on that. We can report back on that.
I'm just curious.
I believe last night you said there was a mailer going out. When is it going out?
We're going to try it. I don't know.
Plenty of time before this.
Yes, we're wanting to get it out before we break. So that's going through. We're outsourcing that through one of the local businesses. Mrs. Brandon has been on that to Price and Friend and do the mailing. So every mailing is a couple $1,000, $2,500. So it's not cheap, but it's something that we, at the very least, want to try to make sure that it hits every mailbox and invite people in.
Is there some that, we can take it for the businesses or?
We're doing that. We have about 18 different local businesses where all this is going to circulate through, and she's done these nice logo stands, so it'll identify as Navajo Public Schools content hopefully those regular patrons of those businesses will see that as a go-to place.
I think that expense for the mailing is very minute when you talk the scope of this project, which, in two phases could total $60 million. So, a few $1,000s here or there is very minuscule compared to the overall project.
Agreed.
And then on the mini-series, how's that presented? Is that just?
So we will, we're going to, we talked about mailing that out as well. We know we'll do all of our social media outlets, and then, talk to the papers. We may actually end up running it more as an advertisement in the papers. We talked about doing like this, we can stuff those into the, whatever the community is, but that sometimes just goes straight into the round file. So we think the maybe better approach is to get them printed in a paper, maybe paper advertisement there. And then we may also try to condense those down into one mailing, maybe do instead of 10 individual mailings a week. I don't think that would be wise. Maybe we condense that down into 2 additional follow-up mailings that goes out. But at the end of the day, we want to try to get that information to every postal address to the extent that we can.
And Grant, I don't know that we answered your question directly. I think there was about a dozen folks there.
So mailers going out in 2 weeks. I guess the quickest turnaround to get on that.
And that one is to broadcast
the forums.
Any other questions, comments on the facility plan communications?
So that we'll be trying to get on that mailer what Larry suggested as far as
yes.
You haven't missed anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Closing comments, questions? I encourage you to look through that mini-series and provide feedback to Dr. Wheeler. Colonel Slack, we're getting closer.
I apologize, a couple things going on at the office, that's
I totally understand. Just got more items. Next item on new business is the cash flow analysis.
So this is for information only, and I'm going to be very brief on this, but when we look at funding strategy, the board is aware that we're chasing grant opportunities to see this project through to completion. In the instance that we are not, let me back up. Phase 1 as a carry forward with the grant funding that's in queue as well as cash on hand. The full project would require that federal larger grant. If we are not successful there, this information is designed to provide the board a what if we decided that we wanted, or if the community decided that we don't want to wait on a grant, we want to go ahead and try to do this locally through those things that are within our control. So this is a build out of what a dollar levy increase would mean for additional revenues and how that could fund the project. To be abundantly clear, that is not something we're even looking at right now, but it is something that we need to be aware of and be able to speak to. So that if we're asked that question, we can say, it's not something we're looking at. It is a possibility, and frankly, for lack of a better term, probably a fallback plan that could be exercised if our community decided that we find ourselves in that position and we want to do it. But it is pertinent. I wanted to demonstrate to the board that we're also looking at all different strategies to try to move this thing down the tracks.
Any questions, comments on the cash flow analysis? Okay, we will move on to the whole business of policy updates. There's 4 policies there that, our MSBA is sending an update on. Do you want to mention anything on those?
Yes, we received a follow-up from MSBA that is to hold on policy BBB and BBB AP1. That has kind of been rescinded, that language. They have sent follow-up language, but I'll not include that until the January meeting. So the recommendation stands as presented, which is a no action on all items with the exception of the BBB and BBB AP1.
So we're updating 3.
Yes, sir.
Questions, comments, concerns? The will of the board will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the MSBA 2021 seat policy updates as presented.
Thank you, Kelly. Paul Birchie seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 6-0. One last item, you got some stuff in front of you, and I'll ask for some clarification. I know where one of them came from. The cup came from the social committee, and they did a great job of putting together a very good holiday party, and with great attendance. So appreciate all of his efforts. The bag is mystery to me, so.
That's from Mr. Coron, and he does some really nice treats for us.
Yeah, the bag is, don't eat that. It might smell good, but don't eat that. Unless you say a cuss word in my house, we used to have to eat that. That is some homemade soap for you to enjoy, so enjoy that, your families as well.
Thank you very much.
Wife's name on it.
It smells like Grandpa's pipe. Yours does. So if you want your wife to smell like Grandpa's pipe, then yes, you would.
As long as she's not watching.
Kelly's does not smell like Grandpa's pipe. It smells like spearmint, and you have a little extra stuff in there.
Can I just make one thing? You know, going back to the state assessment data review, does it seem like it's really, really good? Is that something that's normal, or were we surprised at how good it was?
I was more surprised on some of the areas that we worked in, because traditionally we've been showing extreme growth across the board in grades 3 through 5 in mathematics, and to see a drop in 4th grade at Caney and in 5th grade at Caney, 5th grade over at Whiteman, that was more surprising to me than anything. And the middle school just knocked it out of the park this year. So, or last year that was the best data I've ever seen. The math data, hands down, best I've ever seen since I've been here since 2007.
I attribute that to, in large part, to the government's structure. You guys allowed us to use common sense and get our kids through the year with the least amount of disruption, the same thing you're doing this year. And our parents played ball, they were agreeable. I mean, it was a team effort, and then they let our teachers do their job, and the kids get in the classrooms and do their job. So,
the state percentages dropped significantly this year, so you can see where we went up and they went down. So we stayed pretty level where we were, except for the few areas that I mentioned. So our in-person instruction obviously worked. It worked well.
Okay, with that,
Sir, I'll just make one comment. Taking off my military representative hat and now being a dad of 2 high schoolers, kind of follow on Paul's comment there. To see those the assessment rates for the high schoolers, the scoring and everything else, that was one of the great things that when I found out we were coming here, when we researched the school, that just proves how great the district is. So as a parent of 2 high schoolers, thank you to the district and everything that all our teachers do. So I appreciate it.
it's our pleasure. And our middle school science score should go up as well. No pressure, but,
It's only 7th grade. They don't think
it's a great district. That's great teachers, great families, great kids. And we want to keep getting better. I have a gift. I did not procure a ELF gift procurement manager at risk. Your gifts are forthcoming, so they may not make it here before the holiday, but you guys will have a little nice treat coming your way as well from the Leader household. But we appreciate all you guys do, and also thank you to those of you who attended last night, as well as President Bolden and Mr. Bertie for coming out today to the event. Our team, we were really looking at the social committee canceling that Christmas party based on some feedback and some conflicts, and they were really on the fence. I said, you know what, let's go, at the end of the day, let's go a different direction and do something a little bit different. We're able to host out at Simple Blessings, and I think from all indicators, they had a really, really nice time. It was nice to see the entire team together, just kind of celebrating Christmas and the end of the season. So thank you guys. We spent a little money on it, but every penny was more than worth it.
I think it was a huge success, and just glad to see everybody there, including our building administrator. Great.
Thank you.
I think the worst thing is they had to listen to me for a little bit because Dr. Wheeler asked me to talk, so. With that, brings our time in open session to a close. We need a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Make a motion to adjourn the executive session pursuant to RSMO 610.021, 1, 2, 3, and 13. Roll call vote.
Thank you, Casey, for making that motion.
I second.
Kelly seconds. Start with roll call vote, starting with Hilsey. Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries unanimous 6-0. Take some time to get a little food from the cooks, and appreciate what they do. We will reconvene in about 15 minutes.